The sustainable goal is the elimination of the middle class. The world cannot support 6 billion people. But you see, the plan behind sustainable development includes population control. It's a program for land use control, education control, and population control. The leaders of the sustainable movement say that the world's human population should not exceed 500 million people. That's a 93% reduction of today's population levels. In 1992, while the Rio Conference was going on, George Bush, then president, was there. He was just offshore in Prince Charles's yacht, where he executed the Agenda 21 protocols on behalf of the United States and brought it back to Washington, D.C. Within a year, Bill Clinton, by executive order, established the President's Council for Sustainable Development.
In 1996, Bill Clinton set up the President's Council on Sustainable Development. One of the dictates of Agenda 21 is that every country in the world is to set up a national council to oversee the implementation of Agenda 21. I've listened to Gorbachev explain, we are writing a new set of 10 or 15 commandments to replace the original 10. Which one of the 10 do you think these guys don't like? Thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet. Because I'll tell you what, these people have lied to us. They're in the process of stealing all of this nation's natural resources, and they covet everything you have left.
To explain the map, the red are areas that are to be off limits to human beings. If you live there, you won't. The yellow areas are the areas for major control of all human activity. If you live there, you won't. The black dots are the smart growth zones. That's where human beings are to be stacked and packed in small living units along rail tracks. The Smart Growth Program ultimately has jobs assigned and children cared for by the state.
And in conjunction with Codex Alimentarius, food will be limited and water consumption will be decreased to 10 gallons per day per person. That is over a 90% reduction in people's average daily water consumption. And along with shortages of food and water, the food we will be provided with will be genetically manipulated and nutrient deficient. Genetic manipulation of food causes complications in metabolizing and utilizing food for energy.
In June of 2003, scientists reported that the gene sequence of the inserted genes into crops had actually changed their order. They had re-scrambled. So the genetic inserts are not stable. Another laboratory confirmed this and found that it changed in the same varieties in different ways that they had tested. So not only is it unstable and changing, it's not even uniform in the way it's changing. This is incredibly dangerous.
Nutrient deficiencies due to Codex's planned vitamin and mineral ban will cause billions of preventable diseases. Both of these will ultimately lead to billions of deaths.
Is this. The definition of torture adopted here is torture is the systematic and deliberate infliction of acute pain in any form by one person on another or on a third person in order to accomplish the purpose of the former against the will of the latter. TLDR, they want to force people to do something. Amnesty International describes a little bit about how this mechanism works when they talk about torture as a stress. In physical torture, of course, one of the big things that they do is they bind people into very uncomfortable body positions. And we've seen this over and over. And that is body stress, that's physical stress. But torture can be a mental stress too. In this section, Amnesty International describes torture as stress, and they go through acute, short-lived shock response type stress, subacute medium-term stress, which produces anxiety response but allows the victim to maintain morale and personal integrity. And then through to the chronic response to stress, which is long-standing, and it includes depression, suicidal ideation, dissociation, derealization, regression, becoming accident-prone, a loss of will to live, and possibly suicide. This is the stage the torturers want people to get to. They want to move everybody through the shock. Let's say when you first get taken prisoner. Now this is all about POWs, remember. But we can apply this more widely, and that's what I'm going to do shortly. So their experiences of acute stress might be the initial capture. And then the subacute stress is when they don't know what's going on, and they're first being interrogated and maybe left hungry, maybe left sleeping in terrible conditions and this sort of thing. But in that condition, the soldier still believes in the mission. He still believes that he can get out of there. He still believes he can cope with the torture that they're putting him through. And then, if it goes on long enough, they move to this chronic stress phase, which, as you see, results in more devastating results. And this can all be done without ever touching the prisoner. An interesting side note here before we move on to more specifics in this general area of torture. They say that in chronic stress, people give up. They give up their will to live. They lose their normal responses and desires. But they also say giving up could take other forms. In their study of soldiers who were POWs for a longer period of time, they say men became susceptible to illnesses like bronchopneumonia, asthma, bronchitis, coronary disease, TB, and cancer. Look how many of those, though, are bronchial. And what would a bronchial stress response look like today in the paradigm they've created? They would make you a suspect of having COVID, wouldn't they? Would they say bronchial pneumonia, asthma, and bronchitis? So you're super stressed. You develop bronchial symptoms and you go to the doctor, and they're going to lump you in with the COVID people, thereby increasing your stress and putting you into their system more deeply. Nobody wants to be involved in this contact tracing thing or be forced to be intubated or be separated from their loved ones. Nobody wants that. So it's an evil genius of this type of torture that I say we're under right now, that our stress responses themselves are used against us. Amnesty International goes on to describe how people are manipulated and how they resist. And they say it is the transition from the subacute to the chronic stress response that the torturer seeks to orchestrate, initially by systematically weakening the subject. This forms part of the classic pattern of manipulation described by the post-Korean War research of a guy called Biderman. Biderman was instrumental in debunking the myth that Chinese had used mysterious or magical means to brainwash the Allied prisoners of war. He found out that they just used this psychological manipulation technique, which is now called DDD, dependency, debility, and dread. The coercive technique for psychological torture, induced dependency, debility, and dread. So let's look at that. Now, keep in mind, they're looking at this from an interrogator point of view. So they say questioners here, but you can replace it with coercers or torturers. First part, debility, physical weakness. For centuries, questioners have employed various methods of inducing physical weakness: prolonged constraint, prolonged exertion, extremes of heat, cold, or moisture, and deprivation of sleep. The assumption is that lowering the subject's physiological resistance will lower his psychological capacity for resistance. They say here, however, there's been no scientific investigation of this assumption. That is...
It now turns out that stress, the problem that fear generates, stress, is responsible for up to 90% of all disease. We have to learn to let go of the fear. Consciousness needs to change. It's the chronic fear chemistry itself that is the cause of the problem. Change your mind, you change the chemistry, and therefore you become empowered. I'd like to discuss today the concept of how fear influences our biology. What we understand from the nature of epigenetics is that the composition of the blood is actually what controls our genetic activity. That the composition of that blood, the chemistry of it, is based on the perceptions that we hold in our mind. And when we start to hold a perception of fear, we release different chemistry in the blood to prepare us to protect ourselves from the fear that we believe is going to affect us. So I go, well, what happens? I say, when we hold a picture of fear, one of the things that happens is that we start to get mobilized to get our body to respond to that fear. And most of us know that mobilization is related to the adrenal system, the fight or flight system built into our body. So I say, well, what happens physiologically when we're experiencing fear in our mind? And the answer is the brain releases elements such as stress hormones as cortisol and norepinephrine, as well as agents that affect the immune system such as histamine or cytokines. I go, so what is the collective response of the chemistry of fear in the blood? And the answer is it redirects the flow of energy in our body. Understand this, that the blood is controlling the energy because that's where all the nutrients and the resources are. And normally, when we're not in fear, the blood is more or less concentrated in our viscera, the organs that actually help the body grow and repair itself and maintain itself. So the blood energy is now being used to maintain our biology. However, if we live in fear, such as the old concept of being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, the question is, where do you want the blood? Well, since the adrenal system helps us in fight or flight, the adrenal system is going to redirect the blood flow into the arms and legs because those are the organs that we use to escape the fear. So the first thing that happens when fear is present in our mind is that the stress hormones go in the blood. They actually cause the blood vessels in the gut to shut down. Why? Because we don't need to use the energy to grow and maintain the body when we're chased by that tiger. When the blood vessels in the gut squeeze shut, the blood is now forced to the arms and legs, which are necessary for the fight or flight response. And it's interesting because in a state of fear, some people experience what are called butterflies in the stomach. That butterflies in the stomach is the physiological consequence of the stress hormones causing the blood vessels to squeeze shut in the gut, pushing the blood to the arms and legs. And that's where we need the energy of the system. So number one, when you're living in fear, you shut down the growth and maintenance of the body as you prepare for fight or flight. Number two, there's another effect as well, and that is when fear hormones are put in the body, again, we want to conserve all the energy possible to run away from that tiger. So we shut down any mechanism that is not necessary in a fight or flight response. This is particularly important in regard to the immune system. The immune system is like an internal adrenal system. The immune system protects me from threats on the inside. The immune system uses a lot of energy, as you well know, because if you've ever been sick, you realize how little energy you have. You may not even have enough energy to get out of bed. So the significance here is important. When the stress hormones are released in the body to conserve the energy for fight or flight, the stress hormones shut down the immune system. And this is very vital because the usage of that energy by the immune system is so high it would interfere with the fight or flight response. So a significant aspect is this. Not only do we redirect the flow of blood away from the viscera, which maintains our body, we also inhibit the immune system, which is protecting the interior of our body. Now, if it's just a run away from a saber-toothed tiger 10 minutes and you escape the tiger, then the system can return to normal. But what happens in chronic fear? The fear of life of every day that we're not being supported? The answer is this, then chronically we are shutting down the maintenance of the body, which opens us up to infections and inflammations and all other problems. And while we're open to those infections, guess what? We also now shut down the immune system, which is protecting us from those infections. So when I say we shut down the growth of the maintenance of the body, we shut down the immune system, for a 10-minute escape from a tiger, no problem. But in today's world, stress is not 10 minutes, it's 24/7, 365. What is the consequence of a long duration of living in fear? And the answer is the body starts to become sick, and starts to fall apart. It now turns out that stress, the problem that fear generates, stress, is responsible for up to 90% of all disease. And so while we were thinking genes were causing the diseases, no, it's the consequence of stress and the chemical consequence of that, shutting down growth, shutting down the immune system, opens up the body for a failure. And this is why disease is the result of chronic fear. So the relevance is this: we have to learn to let go of the fear. We have to recognize that most of the fear is just programming, people scaring us with beliefs about this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And when we hold those beliefs in our mind, those beliefs are translated into the chemistry of stress, which then impacts the body in a very negative way. So consciousness needs to change. We have to stop the fear thoughts. We have to switch into healthier thoughts. So if there's a picture of fear, this is actually debilitating you. So in your mind, every time a fear comes up, if you change it into some other story, change it to some other vision, change it into visions of happiness, joy, anything you would rather do, because the fear itself is the cause of the illness. And the fear is the result of consciousness. And it's not actually real in most cases. It's a belief. And if we change that belief surrounding the fear, we are then empowered to return back to a healthy, vital system where the blood is flowing back into the viscera, maintaining us, and the inhibitions on the immune system are stopped. And in this process, we can then have a life of full health and happiness, especially when you recognize that over 90% of the diseases facing this planet are all coming from fear. It's up to us. We can change the fear. You consciously must redirect that fear and change it by replacing it with thoughts of love, happiness, joy, health, and all those wonderful visions, because in that mindset, the chemistry will actually enhance your vitality. It's the chronic fear chemistry itself that is the cause of the problem. Change your mind, you change the chemistry, and therefore you become empowered to survive and thrive.
That's what the pet implant program is all about. It's not about finding lost pets. They don't give a damn about pets, and they would never put a satellite in orbit to find a lost pet, but yet there's a satellite up there that they're using to find pets that have been implanted with these devices. They're testing this program on pets that's going to be used in human beings. And in the Los Angeles Times in 1989, they ran an article. It was 10 forecasts for the coming decade, was the title of the article. I have a copy of it in my research center. And number 5, I believe it was number 5, in those 10 forecasts for the coming decade was chemical or electronic implants to control individual behavior on a 24-hour basis, unquote. So it's not hidden at all. It's there for anybody who wants to look.
But nobody's looking.
Nobody's looking. They believe, and I believe that they're right, that the biggest danger to mankind right now is man himself, population. A study in 1957 told them that by 1990 the world population would double in 33 years. Can you imagine that? The world population of human beings doubled in 33 years. Mm-hmm. And they knew that it's an exponential doubling throughout history. Every time it's doubled, the interval has gotten shorter. So that was 33 years. The next doubling will take place in approximately 28 years. The next one after that, approximately 24 years. Can you imagine if the world population doubles again in 28 years from 1990? In other words, in the year 2018, the world population doubles. And we're having problems with food supplies and timber and clean water and clean air now. And then after that, it doubles again in another 24 years. That's why they created AIDS. Because they didn't want to have to go around the world and say, you, and you up against the wall, you've got to die today, and shoot them. They did it in a manner to where they could target what they consider to be undesirable populations. And I want to be very clear that I don't agree with them on this. They specifically targeted blacks, Hispanics, and homosexuals for complete eradication. And AIDS is really going through those populations and it's really doing a number
That
on blacks, Hispanics, and homosexuals.
That theory has made news. I've heard that before, and,
Well,
and
this
it's been
isn't a
debunked
theory.
very clear by the public, saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous." But you're saying that that may indeed be the case.
It's not ridiculous. I actually saw this in documents, and the project name was Project Naomi. MK Naomi was the name of it. It was a CIA project. The AIDS, whatever causes AIDS, whatever that turns out to be, according to those documents, was developed at Fort Detrick, Maryland, under a CIA project called MK Naomi. It was financed by $10 million for the Department of the Army's biological warfare programs. It was carried out, supervised by the CIA, carried out by scientists who worked for the Special Operations Division of the Department of Defense. And it's doing its job.
And would you assume if AIDS doesn't work, there's a contingency plan for that even?
Well, I think that they have other things out there working concurrently. One thing I've learned about these men is they don't just do one thing. In case the public discovers what they're doing, or discovers that somebody's doing, whether they know who's really doing it or not, and stops it. What they have running is several concurrently running plans, so that if one or two fail, the other ones are going to take care of the problem.
It sounds pretty hopeless. I mean, based on that scenario, is there anything, any uprising or what?
Yeah, there is, but it requires that people wake up. It requires that they really learn the truth instead of live their life in fantasy land. You see, because nothing can exist without the consent of the people. Unless they buy it, it's not going to happen.
What's the fastest, easiest way to know how somebody thinks? And you can determine that. What was the second sentence about control? All right, here it is again. If I know you better than you know me, I can influence you. If I know you better than you know yourself, I can control you. And that is more true than not. The problem with a lot of the influence, and we live, right now we're in the world's largest psychological operations petri dish. There are huge amounts of mind control and psychological influence techniques being leveraged on you every moment of every day. And now because of the COVID, because of all these other things, it's even worse because now we're being, our amygdalas are being hijacked. And so we're being thrown into these pathological trance states with little or no idea how they're doing it or what effect it's having on us. Even those of us who think we're not under the control of those kinds of influences are, many times we are. And here's another saying that I teach all of my Killer Influence students, and I invite you to come to Killer Influence if it's something that you think might help give you an advantage in your life in the future. And this one goes like this: anything outside of your awareness is outside of your control. Anything outside of your awareness is outside of your control. And just because it's outside of your awareness does not mean it's not controlling you. Okay? So part of my job as a teacher is to help you as a practitioner, as an agent of influence, the person who's at the cause in your world, to give you the ability to become more self-aware.
Never on Nightline. I couldn't begin to tell you. He's one of the leading intellectuals in the entire world. I have no idea. I mean, I can make some guesses. He may be one of the leading intellectuals who can't talk on television. You know, that's a standard that's very important to us. If you got a 22-minute show and a guy takes 5 minutes to warm up, now I don't know whether Chomsky does or not, he's out. One of the reasons why Nightline has the usual suspects is one of the things you have to do when you book a show is know that the person can make the point within the framework of television. And if people don't like that, they should understand it is about as sensible to book somebody who will take 8 minutes to give an answer as it is to book somebody who doesn't speak English. But in the normal given flow, that's another culture-bound thing. We got to have English-speaking people. We also need concision.
So Greenfield, or whatever his name is, hit the nail on the head. The U.S. media are alone in that it is, you must meet the condition of concision. You got to say things between two commercials or in 600 words. And that's a very important fact, because the beauty of concision, you know, saying a couple of sentences between two commercials, the beauty of that is that you can only repeat conventional thoughts.
I was reading Chomsky 20 years ago. I think his notion, didn't he co-author a new book called Engineering Consent or The Manufacturing of Consent? I mean, some of that stuff to me looks like it's from Neptune.
This is the first time the Neptune system has been seen clearly by human eyes. These pictures, taken only hours ago by Voyager 2, are its latest contribution.
You know, he's perfectly entitled to say that I'm seeing it through a prism too. But my view of that, of his notions about the limits of debate in this country is absolutely wacko.
Suppose I get up on Nightline, say, I'm given whatever it is, 2 minutes, and I say Gaddafi is a terrorist, Khomeini is a murderer, you know, et cetera, et cetera. The Russians, you know, invaded Afghanistan, all this sort of stuff. I don't need any evidence. Everybody just nods. On the other hand, suppose you say something that just isn't regurgitating conventional pieties. Suppose you say something that's the least bit unexpected or controversial. Suppose you say,
I mean, the biggest international terror operations that are known are the ones that are run out of Washington.
Or suppose you say, what happened in the 1980s is the U.S. government was driven underground.
Suppose I say the United States is invading South Vietnam, as it was.
The best political leaders are the ones who are lazy and corrupt. If the Nuremberg laws were applied, then every post-war American president would have been hanged.
The Bible is probably the most genocidal book in our total canon.
Education is a system of imposed ignorance.
There's no more morality in world affairs fundamentally than there was in the time of Genghis Khan. They're just different, they're just different factors to be concerned with. Now, Chomsky, thank you.
Well, people will quite reasonably expect to know what you mean. Why did you say that? I never heard that before. If you said that, you better have a reason, better have some evidence. In fact, you better have a lot of evidence, because that's a pretty startling comment. You can't give evidence if you're stuck with concision. That's the genius of this structural.
The message is a brave new world, but it is possible to make people contented with their servitude. I think this can be done. I think it has been done in the past, but I think it could be done even more effectively now, because you can provide them with bread and circuses, and you can provide them with endless amounts of distractions and propaganda.
There be a better time to be alive. Let the world say thank you with some.
Let us be thankful we have an occupation to fill. Work hard. Increase production. Prevent accidents. And be happy.
Through the Son of Man. These people learned how to control others through the use of a hidden knowledge. This ability to keep that fire going was a technology that nobody else knew. By observing the fire, by keeping it going, by creating ceremonies around this fire, they became a mystery to the others. A mystery always holds sway over those who don't understand it. And the priesthood was born. No king ever existed without the permission of the priesthood. And I don't care what religion you're talking about or what period of history you're talking about, it is the truth. The kings never had the power, and don't to this day. Kings exist at the whim of the real power, which is the priesthood standing behind the throne. And when the king ceased to be of benefit to the priesthood, they would simply poison him or get rid of him in some other way. The king is dead, long live the king, and there would be another king appointed. There was even a time in history when the king was a sacrificial king, just like John F. Kennedy was in the Temple of the Sun known as Dealey Plaza. They would pick a young man at the height of his virility, appoint him king for 1 year. During that time, he could do or say or command whatever he wanted. The priesthood was always there to make sure he commanded the right things. Have any woman that he wanted. And at the end of the year, he was ceremoniously sacrificed upon a rock. His heart ripped out, his body dismembered into 14 pieces and scattered over the land. And this is where the legend of the Osirian cycle began. It was to ensure the fertility of the crops of the next year. And young men would volunteer for this in their patriotic duty to their kingdom, to their family, so that they could have prosperous years. Much as our young men may volunteer to rush out over the water to a place called Kuwait or Iraq and die in the God-forsaken sands of a place that nobody can even find on a map and never heard of until it happened, all so that he can be called a patriot, someone his family can be proud of. It escapes me how they can ever arrive at these conclusions, but they do, and the priesthood always takes the most advantage of this willingness to sacrifice oneself upon the altar of his country. The problem with it is very seldom really for the country. It's for the advancement of the agenda of the priesthood, whoever the priests happen to be at the time. Am I attacking the church? You better believe it. All churches, all organized religions that have existed since the beginning of the time. Am I attacking the religion of individuals? Never, not on your life. He wasn't trying to create a big church. He knew what happened to those things. And you're all wrong about that man. When you say you shouldn't get angry, you shouldn't curse, you shouldn't do things that upset other people, because that's what Jesus spent his whole life doing. He threw the money changers out of the temple. Don't you think that made some people angry? Don't you think it was rude to walk up to somebody's place of business, smack them in the mouth, grab their table, and throw it out the door? What about the time he cursed the fig tree? You know, pious Christians sometimes make me very angry. They don't even know Christianity. They don't know the man they're following. He was a revolutionary. He was a dangerous man. And by God, so am I. And so should you be. This country was founded by dangerous men. And the moment the people in this country cease to be dangerous men, it's going to be the day we cease to have a country. Their whole goal with this philosophy is to teach all men and women that the only end of life is to seek the utmost pleasure and happiness that you can get out of it, because when you die, there's nothing else. That's what they teach. That's what they want you to be. They don't want laws against sexual promiscuity. That's why they don't want families. That's why they don't want marriage. That's why they encourage homosexuality. There's a method to their madness. There's really not much method to yours, because you're operating from a place of ignorance. And until you change that, you're going to be bumbling around, bumping into each other, saying and doing the wrong things, not understanding the nature of your enemy. And if you don't understand the nature of your enemy and the weapons they use, you cannot fight that enemy. You can't fight the battle. You shouldn't even be on the battlefield. That's why you're losing the war. And don't tell me you're not, because I'm in a place of great knowledge about who's winning and who's losing this war. And I can assure you, you're losing the war. Doesn't mean it can't be turned around. Americans, for all these years, have been looking around for the enemy. They've never been able to find an enemy. So those who control them were able to control them even better by giving them an enemy. That's what Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt determined at Yalta. Who was going to be the enemy post-war? Turned out to be Stalin. And there was going to be this phony Cold War so that the population would never discover the real enemy. And I'm talking about the population of the Soviet Union as well as the rest of the world. You see, the enemy has always been here. It's your uncle, your aunt, your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, your nephew, your nieces, who belong to the fraternal orders collectively known as the Mysteries, the very highest degrees of which, combined together, make up a secret order known as the Illuminati. Their goal is to destroy all existing religions save theirs, all existing governments save theirs, and shackle the mob in a system of eternal oppressive debt chained to a computer for the rest of their life, in a propagandized world to make them believe that they are happy in this system. Now, do you think they're succeeding? Yes. Haven't I described to you just now exactly what is going on in the world today?
We have individuals who are religious fundamentalists, religious fanatics, and this is the expression, RT-PCR, real-time PCR expression of the VMAT2 gene. Over here, we have individuals. So let me complete. So over here, we have individuals who are not particularly fundamentalist, not particularly religious, and you can see there's a much reduced expression of this particular gene, the VMAT2 gene. Another evidence that supports our hypothesis for the development of this approach. What you see
here is by spreading this virus, we're going to eliminate individuals from donning on a bomb vest and going into a market and blowing up the market.
So our hypothesis is that these are fanatical people, that they have overexpression of the VMAT2 gene, and that by vaccinating them against this, we'll eliminate this behavior. So we have some very, very remarkable data in this next slide. Here we have two brain scans. These are fMRIs. These are two different individuals with different levels of expression of VMAT2. On top is an individual who's a religious fanatic, an individual, and we've repeated this numerous times, that has high levels of VMAT2. Now, this individual down here who had low levels of the VMAT2 gene, this individual would self-describe as not particularly religious. In each case, these individuals were read a religious text. This individual lit up the right middle frontal gyrus, shown here, and that's a part of the brain that's associated with theory of mind. It's a part of the brain that has to do with intents and beliefs and desires. In marked contrast, here's an individual who would not particularly self-describe as religious, and when they're read a religious text, what you see is that this part of the brain called the anterior insula lights up. This is a part of the brain that's associated with disgust or displeasure on hearing something.
So you're suggesting I take a CT scan with me when I'm evaluating people to determine whether I put a bullet in their head?
So the data that I'm presenting here supports the concept that we're proposing, and I think that we would not propose to do CT scans or fMRIs on individuals out in the hinterlands of Afghanistan. The virus would immunize against this VMAT2 gene, and that would have the effect that you see here, which is it's essentially to turn a fanatic into a normal person. And we think that will have major effects in the Middle East.
How would you suggest that this is going to be dispersed? The aerosol?
Well, so the present plan and the tests that we've done so far have used respiratory viruses, such as flu or rhinoviruses, and we believe that that's a satisfactory way to get the exposure of the largest part of the population. Most of us, of course, have been exposed to both of those viruses. and we're quite confident that this will be a very successful approach.
While the rest of the country has been counting votes, an Army general named Gus Perna has been counting doses of vaccine. He's in charge of Operation Warp Speed, the catchy title given to the crash program to inoculate 300 million Americans against the coronavirus by next spring. For those of you longing to reclaim a semblance of your previous life, it may not seem all that speedy, but it is compared to the 5 to 10 years it usually takes to field a new vaccine. Once approved, it will not be a silver bullet. Just as with the annual flu shot, some of us will still get sick. But it should make enough people immune so that the virus runs out of places to go. That would give this country what it badly needs right now, a shot in the arm. So if this distribution of vaccines doesn't go according to plan, where does the buck stop?
Me. Conversation's over. It's pretty easy. Me. I hold myself 100% personally accountable to that end.
On his whiteboard is one possible scenario. The all-important approval by the Food and Drug Administration of a vaccine developed by Pfizer, followed by approval of another from Moderna. What is D-Day?
The day that we deliver the first round of vaccine.
What is D-Day?
The day that we deliver the first round of vaccine. For Pfizer.
That's when it would start to get complicated, because if approved, the Pfizer vaccine will require patients to receive 2 separate shots, 21 days apart.
We know it's a 2-dose vaccine, so we want to ensure that we can manage the delivery of the first dose and ensure the delivery of the second dose while we simultaneously integrate new rounds of doses being delivered to the American people.
Are you ready to go if a vaccine is approved tomorrow?
Yes, we are.
What's the first order you're going to give?
It's a simple command of execute. It's a simple command of execute.
So once you say execute, how fast does it get out there?
Within 24 hours.
Do you have doses of vaccine already stockpiled?
Yes, we do.
How many do you have stockpiled?
I'm holding on to that number right now because I want to not create anxiety and we need to work through the details. A month from now, I'll have more.
Operation Warp Speed is also stockpiling kits of the needles, syringes, and alcohol swabs needed to give the shot. The medical distribution company McKesson says it already has produced enough kits for 88 million shots. Kits for 88 million shots.
The idea is the kit will marry up with the vaccine, and they will go together as one package to provide that capability to an administration site.
Are you worried about the security of the stockpiles?
We have taken extraordinary precaution in this area, not only for maybe some nefarious effort, but also natural, hurricane, tornado, etc. Right? It's such a commodity to us. We're taking the full steps to make sure that the vaccine is secure.
Armed guards?
Yes.
Armed guards at sites where the vaccine is stockpiled?
Yes.
Once it starts moving, whether on a truck or a plane, is it going to be under guard?
Yes. That's as far as I'm going to talk about it, though, right? Because you don't want to lay out all the plans, but the answer is yes.
Will you be able to track all the moving parts?
Yes. I feel 100% confident of that.
Will you be able to bang your fist on the table and say what happened to that shipment that was going to Good Samaritan Hospital in Baltimore?
Yes. And not only that, I'll know after it gets there how fast they're administering the doses that they were given.
Perna's ability to do that depends on a software program called Tiberius. Which is supposed to link databases from across the government and the shipping companies into one unified picture that everyone can see.
You can turn on where your hospitals are, where your pharmacies, your nursing homes, and where all of your enrolled providers are inside that jurisdiction.
But when Deacon Maddox, a newly retired Army colonel, briefed Perna on how ready Tiberius is for D-Day,
this capability didn't exist 2 months ago. So there's some things that we need to work through.
Deacon Maddox warned that once the vaccine starts flowing, the amount of data Tiberius has to keep track of will multiply. What's your worst nightmare?
We get vaccines to the American people and they don't take them. Shame on us. Hey, I was already sick. I don't need it. Shame on us. Hey, I don't believe in vaccines. Shame on us. Just shame on us. And it does keep me up at night.
AstraZeneca revealed details of its large coronavirus vaccine trials on Saturday, the third in a wave of rare disclosures by drug companies under pressure to be more transparent about how they are testing products that are the world's big hope for ending the pandemic. So normally this process takes years, you test through animals, but this is going on in a matter of months. And they're doing human trials immediately. So AstraZeneca is one of the companies doing human trials of coronavirus vaccine. And we know that in it, they are attacking something called the VMAT2 gene. We'll explain that later on, but it's the VMAT2 gene that is what it's saying here. They killed God. I can't feel God anymore. My soul is dead. What that means is there's something within the vaccine that attacks a particular gene in the DNA that has a connection to God. That may sound crazy, but we're going to show you the peer-reviewed articles and scientific research that substantiates this, and the fact that this is in the vaccine. Guys, this video is the video you have to share. This is the information you have to get to the people because eternity of souls is at stake. Okay? The release comes after a second vaccine volunteer developed neurological problems. These are not neurological problems, okay? These are people that were human, that were created in the image and likeness of God. According to sources who have been familiar with the vaccine trials, the second volunteer suddenly started saying, "They killed God. I can't feel God anymore. My soul is dead." So what happened?
דור חבי, חיים טובים יותר. פייזר, חיי כוכבית 6906.
If you feel you are not properly sedated, call 348-844 immediately. Failure to do so may result in prosecution for criminal drug evasion.
What's wrong? I need something stronger. Take 4 red capsules. In 10 minutes, take 2 more. Help is on the way.
A lot of people walking around out there already dead. A lot of people walking around out there already dead. A lot of people walking around out there already dead.